Hi, Jordan. Welcome back to Just Curious.
You too. Thanks for having me again.
Last time we spoke, you shared how many companies struggle to get AI out of lab and into real workflows. Today, I'd love to dig into your sprint framework, what it is, what problems it's designed to solve, and how it helps organizations move from pilot projects to real business results. Maybe we can start by introducing the framework. Can you walk us through what the sprint framework is and why so many organizations need this kind of structure to go from idea to implementation?
Yeah. So this is really born out of 14 years of product strategy, product development, and implementation that we've been doing as an organization, and naturally we've evolved it over the years to apply to how AI is now kind of the leading technology in terms of transformation for businesses. So the Sprint framework is our systematic 6-step framework or set of principles for strategic AI implementation. The framework itself really emphasizes our learning by doing philosophy, right? And that like the unique value of delivering results while you're doing the implementation road mapping of new and emergent technology is really important, right? Because roadmaps are never static. They're adaptable, they're ever evolving. And as we talked about in our last session, like AI needs to be treated as a change management project initiative, not a technology project. And so, the framework really focuses on small incremental learning by doing steps along the way. So in Sprint, the 6 principles are really spelled out by the letters. So the S in Sprint is strategic alignment. This is really about that AI should serve business goals, not the other way around. Otherwise, we're just doing AI for AI sex. It's AI for AI's sake. And so, we want to begin with the client's vision and business objectives in mind. And before any technical work happens, we want to align AI in service of achieving business goals. So that's what strategic alignment is all about. The P in Sprint is about process mapping and prioritization. Right, this is about everything we could apply AI to so many use cases, but we want to find like the real opportunities that are hidden in the core and fundamental workflows of an organization. So we go through collaborative workflow mapping or journey mapping and an opportunity ranking with key stakeholders. I had mentioned prior that like we want to talk to the people who are feeling the pain in these workflows and see how we can relieve some of that with the support of AI and other automations. The R in Sprint is about rapid experimentation. It's about testing and validating before scaling. And we test and validate often. It's not just once. We're testing and validating new hypotheses, assumptions, things like that with rapid experimentation. AI is great at doing this. Not just AI is so helpful in the speed at which we can do rapid experimentation. So it's about using things like custom GPTs, platforms like Lovable, various different things that allow us to build lightweight pilots and proof of concepts early and often throughout the engagement. The I in Sprint is integration and insights. And this is about learning what works and what doesn't through that real implementation. That's why we run those experiments and while we're scaling as well. So the real-time learning and iteration makes its way into kind of capturing what works and scales for the roadmap, but also in training and improving the AI that we're implementing. So it serves both functions of helping to build the next steps in the strategy, but also improving the AI implementation itself. The N stands for now, next, later roadmap. We build phased approaches to create momentum. Not too much rigidity, but enough structure to know like what are the quick wins now versus what are the big strategic goals longer term. So we have this ever evolving roadmap. It's an adaptable phased roadmap that synthesizes the findings into actionable phases. And then finally, T in Sprint is transfer and transformation, right? This is the change management aspect. This is ensuring that the team that we're working with can own and scale these improvements internally. Right? So the continuous knowledge transfer and enablement focus, the highlight, like especially building internal champions, that's super important to change management. That's what helps go from kind of the pilot phase to full company-wide deployment as you're constantly iterating through an ever-evolving AI roadmap.
Can we share an example of what this looks like in practice? An example or case study of where it applied Sprint, what the challenge was, and how the framework guided the process so someone can understand, what it looks like to go from S to T?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, an example that comes to mind here is an example from a family office that did retirement planning and wealth management family office, right? That we worked with. They came to us with the challenge. The challenge they came to us is that the marketing of their services made a customer promise that they have this plan path, a structured their own framework for how they onboard their customers and develop their wealth plan. But only 25% of advisors actually would follow through on all of the steps to deliver in that plan. You know, creating each plan was a heavy lift. That's why only 25% of the advisors would do it. There was a lot of documentation that needed to be captured from potential customers, a lot of manual work, inputting data, juggling multiple tools, writing technical reports into client-friendly language. So the leadership team's goal was to increase the conversion rates of their customers by increasing the adoption of this plan path process, their own highly manual, highly like process intensive uh, or workflow journey that they would bring each of their customers through. So what I could actually do is maybe I'll screen share a little bit to show you how like visually when we start with the strategy of this planning phase, if you can see my screen here, I can validate it there that it's there, right? We identified that, ultimately, the big challenge, the big workflow that was critical to achieving that business objective to grow their sales, right? To grow their customer acquisition rates and effectively grow sales or grow assets under management for a retirement planning firm, that it was critical that they impacted or grew the adoption of the plan path is what, we called it here, their process for how they onboard their customers. They needed 90% of their financial advisors to use and follow the plan because they know that when they do, those financial advisors have a much higher, I think it was 40% greater or so closing rate of turning that prospect into a customer if they followed the plan steps, from beginning to end. So, we go through the next step with them, right? Which was like the process mapping and prioritization. We mapped out the advisor workflow, right? I'm not going to go through all the detail here, but we mapped out the advisor workflow to uncover the pain point, like the duplicate entry and the lost client language. Like that really came up a lot when we looked at and we were hearing 4 pain points when we were interviewing some of these advisors. From there, we translated those into AI opportunities. If we hear this pain point about lost client language, how might we leverage AI to make sure we infuse the client language into the reports being sent to customers? So these opportunities show up on a impact versus effort matrix. And from here, we can start to develop a prioritization. Look for quick wins that will immediately deliver value and ROI. But we also want to identify big transformational wins, but slot those in the right place in the roadmap. If we start with something that's too big, it's hard to gain that internal traction for the change management, right? If we can focus small early wins and deliver them often, and advisors see their daily work or their daily job becoming easier to do, and they can focus more on the customer, that organically is going to drive more adoption. They're going to say, hey, I want more AI in my workflow. This is working for me. This is helping. So once we identified here, like as an example in PDF reports, we could leverage AI to do parsing of the reports and mapping of the fields from customers, say like their social security reports, into the fields required for the path plan. So what we would do then is we go and define kind of the high level of our rapid experimentation. Like, what are the objectives, the data we're going to use, the tools, what does success look like? And in this case, the lightweight pilot we generated was like a what I want section of the plan for the advisors. This is what the customer wants, right? What they want to get out of their retirement. What do they want in retirement? And this was a critical thing for advisors when they were able to get this and communicate that in the customer's words. You can see kind of conversion rates of those customers improve. And then, of course, we go into I, and like as we're rolling, we build this AI capability and we start to roll it out with, say, 5 advisors to start with, not all 50 that are in the organization. We want to capture what's working for them, what doesn't. Are we seeing the ROI we're experiencing? And what we found when through those experiments and rolling it out more is that we were saving advisors 30 minutes per plan in preparing just this one part of the report. So you think about that, once that scales to 50 employees, how much annual savings in time across advisors, that would create. So of course, then we go into our road mapping of this. We don't just stop there. We think, okay, well, that's one part, one pain point we heard in that process. What are others? Or how do we further evolve this to include other more complicated statements, like parsing bank statements as an example? That is how we kind of focus on that stage of now, next, later road mapping. Quick wins, move into something a little more complicated next, but continue to build and scalability. And finally, transfer and transformation, as I said, like that's about finding named internal champions. The senior advisors became the internal champions for this, which were early on the early skeptics for it, actually. So having senior advisors as the champions and then them having playbooks that equip the advisors with like training for how to, leverage the AI alongside their plan development started to transfer the transformation of it from BlueLabel supporting our client to, the client implementing with new advisors that they would be onboarding that would be led by these, senior advisors. I think you asked, like, what were some of the outcomes that we, they experienced from this? The firm went from about like 25% advisor adoption to upwards of like 80% because like so much more was automated through the process. I think the 20% efficiency gains, they calculated saved about one day a week worth of work for each advisor in manual work that they were doing in preparing the reports. Now AI was taking the heavy lifting of that. And the fact that more customers are being brought through the entire plan path, that their own framework for how they onboard their customers, capture their goals, their data, and whatnot, improve their close rate by 5 points. And that in their market amounts to millions of dollars of assets under management growth for them. So a lot of big impact from small wins incrementally added along the way in developing the roadmap. And naturally now they have kind of like a sustainable 12-month roadmap or longer for ongoing AI implementation in the organization.
Awesome. How long does a engagement like this take from, kicking it off, going through SPRINT? What
Yeah.
does that look like?
So it's a journey, right? It doesn't have a start date, doesn't have an end date per se, but the way that what it looks like is when we're coming in and it's kind of a greenfield scenario where we say, hey, we know we need to adopt AI. This is transformational. We just don't know where to start. What we'll do is we'll take our clients through a sprint framework based workshop, and that's usually a 1-day workshop. We got to do virtually or on site, and we'll go through. That's where we use what I showed you with like the Miro board, design thinking tools like that. In 1 day, we've kind of developed the straw man for the plan, right? Now, next, later roadmap, we've identified some early rapid experiments. And then the next phase kicks off where we start executing some of those experiments. Those rapid experiments could be as little as 2 weeks. We could have something out and starting to be used by some of the people inside an organization. It could take maybe on average like 4 to possibly 8 weeks. Sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. We would argue that an 8-week rollout for a kind of a pilot is long. That's a big pilot because we leverage a lot of AI in the way that we develop these things. And then again, it's a journey, right? So you're constantly going through this iterative roadmap. The now, next, later phases are intended to be conceptually thought of as now being the 90 days right in front of us. What do we focus on for the next 90 days? And that's all constantly rolling. The next stage is more of like, where do we want to be 6 months from now? What are the things we want to be tackling or have tackled 6 months from now? And then later phase is what's the big transformational things? Like what are the things that are going to come, 12 to 18 months later? It's to answer your question, like it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a bit of a journey, but we structure it in little sprints, right? We try to actually use the traditional agile sprint framework in our execution so that every 2 weeks there's some kind of objective being defined and a deliverable at the end of the 2 weeks that keeps us on that now, next, later.
And who is involved from the client team, both in terms of who are you interviewing, but also who is sort of the kind of core team that you're engaging with?
Yeah. So definitely the people we want involved in the sprint planning, especially if we're going through that first stage where we're doing kind of the workshop and the vision setting, the longer, the bigger, higher level road mapping and whatnot. We definitely want to have like the executives, the C-suite of an organization, the CEO, the COO, a CFO. If they have a technical or an IT team, we want the CTO there, and key functional leaders. They're critical for especially the first phases, kind of the strategic alignment part of sprint. When we start getting into process mapping and prioritization and rapid experimentation, then we want to be working with like the business unit heads that are responsible for the area we might be diving into, as well as individuals who are working in that department on a daily basis that are their day job is to execute that particular workflow process or whatnot. So different parts of the sprint, different steps in the sprint framework call for different individuals in the organization.
And if a company wanted to adopt something like Sprint,
Mhm.
what's the most important mindset or practice they need to bring to the table to really take advantage of this?
Yeah. I'd say that, when we talk about I've said it a few times, but it's that mindset that you know, the companies that are going to win with the sprint framework are the ones where they're treating AI as business transformation tied to outcomes, right? Not just another demo, we're adopting another tool. Business transformation tied to their strategic business objectives. And when I say strategic business objectives is where you want to go as an organization, irrespective of AI. That's going to be the kind of thing I would want companies to think about, or leaders to think about when adopting or going into the mindset going into leveraging this framework. Be clear on what your business objectives are long term, and then let's identify where AI can be put in service of helping your organization achieve those business objectives.
Awesome. Anything we didn't capture?
I don't think so. No, I'm.
Great.
I
Awesome. Jordan, thanks for coming by. Just curious.
thanks, too. I appreciate it.